Yahoo Finance executive editor Brian Sozzi sat down with Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong and first asked him about his outlook for crypto in 2024.
Well, we really believe that crypto is the future of money, and that's already here. So it's not just a speculative asset class. People are now using it for all kinds of different types of utility. And we always believed that the industry would evolve in this kind of three pillars. We felt like it would start as an asset class. People would trade speculatively. Then it would become a new type of financial services with people doing stablecoin payments and commerce, remittance payments, earning yield on their assets, getting borrowing and lending with DeFi. And now, we're even starting to see this third pillar come online, which is crypto as a new type of application platform. This is what people are calling Web3. It's a new way for people to build applications in a totally decentralized way with decentralized identity, decentralized social networks, decentralized scientific research. And it's kind of the future of the internet. So it's much bigger than people, I think, realize, who are still thinking about it just as one asset class. And that's something that's exciting.
Since we last talked, I think it was the Goldman Sachs Tech Conference a couple of months ago, but just the prices of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have gone through the roof. What do you think is driving that? Is it fundamental, or is this a good old-fashioned speculative move in crypto?
Well, you can always look back at these things with 2020 hindsight and try to make sense of it. But I think in this case, a few things. One is we've had a number of ETFs being filed by the biggest, asset managers and financial service firms in the world. And by the way, Coinbase has been named as, of course, the custodian in almost all of those, which is great. But I think the market is hoping and anticipating, as we are, that in Q1 we'll see some of those approvals come through. But more importantly, I think what people are reacting to this year is crypto is here to stay. I mean, think about all the bad headlines, the enforcement actions. There were CEOs going to jail, and yet crypto prices are up 90% year to date. And so I think the industry is kind of sending a very clear message here that this technology is here to stay. 38% of young people, if you survey them, they say they think crypto is the best way they have to have some new sort of economic opportunity in life. 90% of Americans are frustrated and upset with the current financial system as it exists. And so, yes, there's going to be ups and downs, but this movement's here to stay. And we need to send that message to Washington too, by the way, because I think not everyone there is aware of that.
The Bitcoin, that ETF, when do you see that being approved? And then once and if something along those lines gets approved, what happens? What happens to the Bitcoin prices? What happens to this industry?
Yeah, well, of course, I don't have any kind of inside information about when it exactly would be approved, but I think myself and others in the industry, we're all kind of hoping that might happen early next year. But what happens is big new pools of capital can now flow into these ETFs. There's certain pools of capital where their restrictions or bylaws don't allow them to, say, sign up to a Coinbase account and own digital assets directly, but they can own an ETF. And so these are where the largest pools of capital in the world, pensions, endowments, hedge funds, things like that, where they may be able to now move into the crypto space. Now, just owning a Bitcoin ETF is great. You're going to be able to get exposure to Bitcoin, but I also think it's going to bring a lot of people into the crypto space who may want to trade and own other assets. They may want to use crypto. They might want to earn yield on their assets or do institutional financing. And so I see it as a benefit not only for Bitcoin, bringing more pools of capital, but also for Coinbase's existing business, Coinbase Prime for our institutions, Coinbase Retail for our retail customers. It's also just going to drive activity and awareness there. So I think it's all around good. And Coinbase has a place to play in the value chain here directly with customers, but also as a custodian for the ETFs.
You've been very vocal, Brian, on the need for regulation, whatever form that may be. I mean, do you think new laws would have prevented some of the blowups we saw in 2022?
Yes, I do. I mean, look, some of the rules are already clear that are out there. You have to follow AML, KYC rules, OFAC sanctions, and I think that part of the ecosystem is already pretty clear. But there's a whole bunch of questions which are not answered currently under the law about, just a great example is, are some of these assets a security or a commodity, right? Gary Gensler, when he was asked by Congress this question for Ethereum, which is one of the major assets, he couldn't answer that question. And so these are big unanswered questions in the space. Now, what has this done? I mean, it's basically driven a lot of the activity offshore to unregulated platforms. Those have had major issues this year, as everyone has seen, and that's caused a lot of consumer harm, including for American investors. And so when there's not a clear rule book, the industry is not going to be built in America. That's bad for the American economy, but it's also bad for American retail investors who are getting hurt by going offshore to these unregulated products. So ideally, the first case option would have been the regulators work with industry under the Administrative Procedures Act. They do a rulemaking process, publish clear rules. Everyone has to follow the same rules. That would allow the industry to kind of flourish in the US. Since that didn't happen, instead, we've had to kind of rely on the courts to create case law, to create some precedent. And we're ultimately, I think, going to have to rely on Congress to pass new legislation that would clarify, where does the CFTC and the SEC, what are their roles in this? So it's not having this turf war, lack of clarity, pushing the industry offshore. And the last thing I'll just say is I think the US is actually kind of behind on this. I mean, 83% of the G20 countries out there have already started work on crypto regulations and new laws. So the US is behind. There are 2 bills going through the House right now that have gotten bipartisan support in House committees. We're hoping those go to a full floor House vote early next year.
You're really plugged into the DC and the regulatory scene, Brian, as you should. I mean, it makes sense. You have to be up to date on this stuff. Do you get that sense that regulators are taking what Jamie Dimon said seriously on a potential ban of crypto?
No, I don't think that's serious. And it's actually strange because although Jamie Dimon's comments were a bit perplexing, internally at JP Morgan, they're actually advancing several projects working on blockchain and crypto technology. So there's such a large organization. I think sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. But no, there's no world in the United States where 52 million Americans have used crypto now. This isn't, 38% of young people believe this is an important tool for their economic growth in the future. I mean, it would be political suicide to be anti-crypto and try to ban it to that extent, right? And so I think next year we need to send a very clear message on that. There's an organization, standwithcrypto.org, which has been bringing together the crypto customer base in the US and trying to get to 1 million of them that will raise their hand next year before the elections and kind of say, all right, I really want to be a crypto advocate. I want to vote for pro-crypto candidates. I want to donate. I want to call my congressmen and representatives. So between the $78 million super PAC that came out yesterday, which is a huge step for the crypto industry, and this standwithcrypto.org grassroots movement, I think we've got a really big chance to send a message in DC.
That was our conversation with Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong.